What would you do if the secret of your pregnancy was revealed in the worst possible way? It was supposed to be a perfect night, the kind of night where everything falls into place. I spent hours preparing Ethan's favorite dinner, hoping to finally earn his mother's approval after weeks of tension. I thought maybe, just maybe, tonight would be the turning point. I could feel the excitement in my chest, the hope for a fresh start, a new beginning. But then everything shattered in an instant. Vivian, my mother-in-law, leaned in close to Ethan, whispering something into his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shift in his face. The calmness that had settled over him like a shield turned to fury, raw, unrestrained anger. My heart sank, and I froze, watching his expression darkened, as if everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped for, was just gone. Is this true? His voice was low, dangerously quiet, but the accusation was clear. He rose from the table so suddenly that his chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor, the sound cutting through the air like a knife. My breath hitched in my throat as I stood there, my mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. My eyes flicked to Vivian, but her gaze was fixed on Ethan, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corner of her lips. Have you been lying to me? Ethan's voice rose, his anger evident now, his words pointed and accusatory. Before I could even think of what to say, the slap came. Unexpected. Brutal. His palm cracked against my cheek with such force that I stumbled, my feet losing balance as I fell into the wall. The pain exploded in my cheek, but it was nothing compared to the shock of what had just happened. Tears welled up in my eyes, but before I could wipe them away, the nausea hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't hold it back. I threw up right in front of them. My husband, my mother-in-law, the people I thought would care for me. Ethan took a step back, his face contorting in disgust as he watched me, as if I was something foreign, something unworthy. But then his eyes landed on my purse, which had fallen open on the floor. The pregnancy test, the one I'd been hiding, the one I had planned to tell him about tonight, lay there in the open. His expression drained of colour as he looked from the test to me, from the test to my face. His voice cracked, low and uncertain. Grace, are you... I reached up, my fingers trembling as they brushed against my stinging cheek. Yes, I whispered, barely able to get the words out, my voice breaking. I'm pregnant. I was going to tell you tonight. That's why I made your favourite dinner. The room was thick with silence. My heart raced, each beat a reminder of how everything had unravelled so quickly. Ethan stood there, motionless, staring at the pregnancy test in disbelief. Then his gaze shifted to his own hand, the hand he had just used to strike me. His eyes widened, the horror of what he had done washing over him. Vivian stood frozen, her lips pressed tightly together. Even she couldn't hide the shock in her eyes now, despite all the years of keeping up appearances, of pretending to be the perfect family. Oh my God, Ethan muttered, his voice trembling. Grace, I didn't mean to... He reached for me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't let him touch me. My body recoiled instinctively, every fibre of my being screaming at me to stay away from him. The man who had promised to protect me, who had vowed to cherish me, had just hit me. The woman carrying his child. The tears streamed down my face, but I didn't make a sound. Not this time. The silence felt like a weight that pressed down on me, suffocating me, until the creak of the door broke the stillness. Chloe, our next-door neighbour, stood in the doorway, her face filled with concern. I heard shouting, she said, her eyes scanning the room and landing on me first. My red cheek, my tear-streaked face, the palpable tension in the air. Ethan's guilty expression, Vivian's stillness. Is everything okay? I knew deep down that nothing was okay, that nothing would be okay for a long time. As Chloe's gaze flicked from Ethan to me, I felt my heart sink even lower. This wasn't just a nightmare I could wake up from. This was my reality now. Ethan, the man I had loved, had just shattered everything with a single moment of rage, and I had to decide, Could I ever trust him again? Could I forgive him? And, most terrifying of all, could I stay with someone who had just hurt me and our baby? I remember the day I met Ethan as though it was yesterday. It was a Friday afternoon at Carter's coffee shop in downtown Austin. I had been grading papers. Being a third-grade teacher meant that my weekends began with a stack of math worksheets and creative writing assignments. Ethan accidentally spilled his coffee on my students' homework, and his frantic attempts to salvage the papers made me laugh. "I promise I'm not usually this clumsy," he said, desperately dabbing at the papers with napkins. "Please let me make it up to you. Coffee or maybe dinner?" That's how it started. Simple, sweet, and completely perfect. Ethan was everything I dreamed of. Successful but humble, funny but responsible, and he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We bought a small house with a backyard, talked about having kids someday, and spent weekends making plans for our future. Then Vivian moved in. "It's just temporary, honey," Ethan assured me. "Mom's having a hard time with the divorce. She needs support right now." I wanted to be understanding. I did. But Vivian had a way of making me feel small in my own home. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The house wasn't clean enough. My cooking wasn't to her standards. And apparently, I wasn't taking good enough care of her precious son. "Ethan works so hard," she'd say, watching me pack his lunch. "He needs more protein than that." The changes in Ethan were subtle at first. He started criticizing things he'd never noticed before. The way I folded his shirts, the food I cooked, how much time I spent talking to my sister on the phone. Each criticism was preceded by those private, whispered conversations with his mother. And together they were made public when I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks ago. I should have been overjoyed. Instead, I felt terrified. I hid the morning sickness, making excuses to rush to the bathroom at school. I kept crackers in my desk drawer and blamed my fatigue on end-of-semester stress. I wanted to tell Ethan first, to have just one moment of joy between us before Vivian took over with her opinions on how I should handle my pregnancy. The night of the slap, I'd finally worked up the courage. I'd planned everything perfectly. Ethan's favourite lasagna, his preferred wine, which I wouldn't be drinking, and even bought a little onesie to surprise him with. But Vivian insisted on coming to dinner. "Family dinners are important," she said, inviting herself. I was in the kitchen layering the pasta when I overheard Vivian on the phone. "She's hiding something, I know it. I saw her running to the bathroom at odd hours, probably having an affair. My Ethan deserves better than that." My hands shook as I placed the lasagna in the oven. An affair? Is that what she whispered to Ethan at dinner? Is that why he was so quick to believe the worst about me? Now, standing in our dining room, with Chloe witnessing the aftermath of what had just happened, I felt the weight of every wrong assumption, every whispered lie, every moment I stayed quiet to keep the peace. My hand moved protectively to my stomach. The baby inside me deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. "Grace." Ethan stepped toward me again, his voice breaking. "Please let me explain." But Chloe had already wrapped her arm around my shoulders. "She's coming with me," she said firmly, "and you better not try to stop her." As Chloe led me out of the house, I heard Vivian's voice behind us. "Ethan, darling, she's hysterical. You know how women get in her condition." The door closed behind us, muffling Vivian's words, but the damage was already done. My perfect life had shattered in a single evening, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The next few days at Chloe's house were a blur of tears, nausea, and endless calls from Ethan that I let go to voicemail. Chloe, bless her heart, took care of everything. She went back to my house to gather my clothes, called the school to request my sick days, and held my hair back during my morning sickness. "Your house isn't a home anymore, Grace," Chloe said one morning, pushing a cup of ginger tea across her kitchen table. "I've watched things get worse over the past 6 months. We all have." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, remembering how things had changed since Vivian moved in. It started with small things. She'd rearrange my kitchen while I was at work, claiming she was helping. She'd make comments about my weight, saying she was concerned about my health, but it was her influence on Ethan that hurt the most. "Remember last month?" Chloe asked gently. "When Ethan skipped your sister's wedding because Vivian said she was feeling too anxious to be alone?" I nodded, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. He didn't even question it. He just called my sister and made excuses while Vivian smirked behind his back. The constant calls and texts from Ethan played like a broken record. "I'm so sorry. Please come home. I'll make it right. I never meant to hurt you." But mixed in with his messages were Vivian's. "You're tearing this family apart. Ethan is devastated because of your dramatics. A good wife would come home and work things out." 1 week after the incident, I had my first prenatal appointment. Chloe came with me, holding my hand as the doctor confirmed I was 6 weeks along. The sound of my baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. Tears rolled down my cheeks, tears of joy mixed with sadness because Ethan should have been there. I had imagined this moment, sharing it with him, with Lily together. "Do you want me to record it?" Chloe whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. That evening, I sat on Chloe's guest bed, staring at my phone. I had promised myself I wouldn't reach out to Ethan, but hearing our baby's heartbeat had changed something inside me. With trembling hands, I sent him the recording with a simple message: "Your child's heartbeat." His response came quickly. "Please, can we talk in person without Mom?" I glanced at my reflection in Chloe's guest room mirror. The bruise on my cheek had faded to a sickly yellowish green, but the fear in my eyes was still fresh. Could I face him? Should I? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vivian. "How dare you send that to him without discussing it with me first? I'm his mother. I should be involved in these decisions." Something snapped inside me. 3 years of keeping quiet, of trying to please her, of watching my husband slowly become her puppet. It all boiled over. I typed the words I'd been holding back for so long. "You are not involved in decisions about my baby. Never have been. Never will be." I blocked her number before she could respond. A few moments later, Ethan called. This time, I picked up. "She's gone too far," he said before I could speak. I heard Vivian on the phone with her friends, bragging about how she'd saved me from his supposed affair. She made it all up. "Grace, I believed her. I hit you because I believed her lies." His voice cracked. I could hear him crying. "I need you to choose," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Either your mother moves out, or I'm not coming back. And if I don't come back, I'll be talking to a lawyer about full custody. I won't raise our child in a home with violence." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like hours, and for a moment I thought he had hung up. Finally, he spoke. "Can you meet me tomorrow at Carter's coffee shop where we first met? Mom won't be there, I promise. I just need to see you." I looked down at my stomach, still flat but carrying our future. "Okay," I whispered. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. But Ethan, if she shows up, I'm done forever." "She won't," he said, his voice firm. "I'm choosing you, Grace. I should have chosen you all along." As I ended the call, I wasn't sure if I believed him, but for the sake of our baby, I had to try. I stood up, leaving my seat beside Chloe, and made my way to Carter's coffee shop. I arrived 15 minutes early, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar smell of coffee beans, which had once comforted me, now made my stomach turn. I chose a table near the door, an easy escape route if things went wrong. Chloe was parked across the street, ready to intervene if needed. At exactly 2 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Ethan walked in alone, just as promised. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same blue button-down shirt he had worn the night of the incident. My body tensed as he approached, but he stopped a few feet from me, respecting my space. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. I nodded, watching as he sank into the chair across from me. His eyes were fixed on my stomach, then darted away guiltily. "I kicked her out," he said without preamble. "Last night. She's staying at a hotel." I wrapped my hands around my untouched tea. "Just like that?" "No," he admitted. She screamed, cried, and told me I was abandoning her. Said I was choosing a... He swallowed hard. I can't even repeat what she called you, but I packed her bags myself. Told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. The couple at the next table couldn't help but glance over, their eyes filled with curiosity. I lowered my voice, feeling the weight of the conversation press down on me. Why now, Ethan? Why did it take this for you to wake up? My voice cracked as I fought to keep my composure. Because I became her. Ethan's voice shook, the words coming out ragged. When I hit you, I became everything I hated about her. Controlling, violent, ready to believe the worst. He wiped his eyes roughly, trying to choke back his own tears. The sound of your head hitting the wall won't stop haunting me. He paused, struggling to breathe. And then I saw that pregnancy test. His voice broke as he collapsed into the reality of his own guilt. The barista's voice calling out an order made me flinch, but it wasn't just the noise that startled me. It was the truth hitting too close to home. Ethan noticed. I could see it in the way his body tensed. I'm scared of you, I admitted in a whisper, the words heavier than I ever thought they'd be. Do you understand that? I'm carrying your child, and I'm scared of you. His gaze darkened. You should be, he whispered back, his voice thick with regret. There's no excuse for what I did. But Grace, please believe me. It will never happen again. I'm starting therapy tomorrow. I already had my first consultation. He reached out, almost desperately. I need to understand why I let her control me. Why I became this person I don't even recognize anymore. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. This wasn't the first apology, but something felt different this time. I have conditions, Ethan, non-negotiable ones. His eyes flickered with hope. Anything, he whispered, his voice pleading. Vivian never sets foot in our house again. No holidays, no visits, nothing. She gets no information about the baby. No photos, no updates, nothing. I leaned in, my heart pounding. Done? He didn't hesitate. Done. His gaze was unwavering. You continue therapy. We also do couples counseling. And if you ever raise a hand to me again, I'm gone. No discussions, no second chances. I'll press charges and file for full custody. I could feel the tension in my chest, the weight of the past few weeks hanging between us. I understand, he whispered, his voice low but certain. His fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone, opening an email. I've already found a couples counsellor. He slid the business card across the table to me. And this is my lawyer. I've asked her to draw up papers for full custody if I ever lose control again. One incident. That's all it would take. The papers are being prepared now. I hesitated, picking up the card, the edges sharp in my trembling hand. You're serious about this? His eyes locked with mine, raw and vulnerable. I love you, Grace. I love our baby, and I hate myself for what I did. When I heard that heartbeat, I realized I was becoming the kind of father I never wanted to be, the kind that makes their child afraid. The silence between us was suffocating, full of unspoken words, unspoken fears. Then finally I broke it. I'm not coming home today, I said softly, the words lingering in the air. I need time, and we start couples counselling first. Ethan nodded, relief flooding his face. Would it be okay if I came to the next doctor's appointment? I hesitated. A part of me wanted to say no, but the tiny flicker of hope that had been extinguished for so long surged back to life. Yes, but Chloe comes too. He agreed without hesitation. Of course, whatever you need to feel safe. As we sat there in that coffee shop, the light outside filtering through the windows, I realized something. We were at a crossroads. No going back. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. The next 2 weeks became a careful dance. Every step, every word was calculated. Ethan attended his therapy sessions twice a week. He sent me photos of his check-ins with his therapist, a small but significant gesture of his commitment. Dr. Martinez, our couples counsellor, worked with us to untangle the web of manipulation Vivian had spun, helping us rebuild trust and communication. But Vivian? She wasn't backing down. "Ethan, your mother's outside my classroom again," I texted him one Tuesday morning, panic rising as I peered through the classroom window. Vivian was sitting in her silver Mercedes, watching the school entrance like a hawk. My fingers shook as I typed. His response was immediate. "Don't move. I'm calling the police." 15 minutes later, I watched through the window as 2 officers approached Vivian's car. The scene that unfolded was a perfect storm. Vivian was playing the victim. Tears, shaking hands, her voice filled with false concern. "I'm just worried about my son's marriage." But as the officers told her to leave, her mask slipped. "She's poisoning my son against me." Vivian's voice echoed through the school parking lot, loud enough for me to hear. Ashley, my classroom aide, placed a hand on my shoulder, offering silent support. "Want me to film this? Might be useful for that restraining order you mentioned." I nodded, my heart pounding. That night, I showed Ethan the video. His face crumpled as he watched. "I never saw it before." His voice was hollow. "How she really is. She acted exactly like she did when Dad left. Screaming, accusing, playing the victim." He turned to Dr. Martinez. "I always believed her version of everything." Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle but firm. "The generational pattern of abuse is strong, Ethan, but you're breaking it. Every time you choose grace and your child over your mother's manipulation, you're breaking it." Later that week, Chloe drove me to another prenatal appointment, with Ethan trailing behind in his car, a new safety measure we'd put in place. The ultrasound technician guided us through the scan, and for the first time since that night, Ethan reached out and took my hand. I let him. The technician asked, "Would you like to know the gender?" She smiled warmly. Ethan glanced at me, asking for permission. I nodded. "It's a girl," she said, her voice soft as she pointed to our baby's tiny form on the screen. "A girl," I whispered, a hand instinctively placed on my stomach, protecting her already. Looking at Ethan, I could see the same thought in his eyes. Our daughter would never know fear. Not in our home. Not anymore. But when we left the clinic, we found Vivian waiting in the parking lot. The sight of her made my blood run cold. Before I could react, Ethan stepped between us, his body solid and unyielding. "Leave," he said, his voice as cold as steel. "Or I'm calling the police again," Vivian's voice screeched, her hysteria rising. "I have a right to know about my granddaughter." But Ethan didn't flinch. "No, you don't," he replied firmly. "You lost that right the moment you made me hurt her mother." Vivian's face twisted with fury. "I never made you do anything. She's turning you against me, just like your father did." "Security's on their way," she said, a chill in her tone. "They've been told to call the cops if you don't leave right now." Vivian's eyes blazed with fury, her lips trembling as she took a step back, but the venom in her voice remained. "This isn't over," she spat. "That's my grandbaby." As Vivian retreated, a twisted satisfaction curled inside me, but it was short-lived. Chloe turned toward me, offering a weak smile, one that couldn't mask the weight in my chest. That night, in Chloe's guest room, I finally let myself crumble. Ethan was just outside the door. We weren't ready for him to stay the night yet, but he refused to leave me alone. After Vivian's outburst, "I've filed for the restraining order," he said, his voice low, almost hollow through the door. "For all 3 of us. Me, you and the baby. My lawyer says with the school video and the clinic incident, we'll get it." I pressed my hand against the door, the simple gesture feeling like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice raw with regret. "For everything. Every time I didn't protect you. Every time I chose her over you." The weight of his words crashed into me. "I know, Ethan," I whispered back, my heart splitting in 2. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for us. I'm doing it for her. I placed a hand on my growing belly. She deserves better than what we had. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke with conviction. Yes, she does. And I swear to you, Grace, we'll give her everything we never had. Safety, trust, love without condition. For the first time in weeks, his words felt like a promise, and for once, I believed him. A week later, the restraining order came through. 3 months, renewable based on behaviour. Seeing the words in writing, Vivian Matthews must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet, was like a weight lifting from my chest. We were doing this. Ethan and I continued our therapy sessions, still unravelling the mess of years under his mother's thumb. We were pulling apart the layers of manipulation and control, one painful conversation at a time. Tell me about the first time you noticed Vivian's influence on you, Dr. Martinez asked Ethan during one session. He rubbed his face, lost in thought. 2 months after we got married, Grace made this beautiful birthday dinner for me, but Mom had already surprised me with lunch. She knew about the dinner. Grace had told her. When I got home, she started going on and on about how worried she was that Grace had wasted money on all that expensive food, when she'd already fed me. Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. And what did you do? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He couldn't look me in the eye. I complained about the dinner, told Grace we needed to be more careful with money. I winced, remembering that night, throwing the whole meal away, the tears in my eyes as Ethan and Vivian laughed in the living room, oblivious to my pain. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment, then spoke gently. Recognizing the problem is the first step toward change. And that's what we were doing, changing, slowly, painfully. By the 5th month, we were ready for me to move back home. Chloe helped me pack. Are you sure about this? I asked, folding my maternity clothes, doubt creeping into my mind. No, I admitted, touching my belly. But I have to try for her. When I stepped into our house, it felt different. Vivian's presence, her photos, her plates, her passive-aggressive sticky notes, was gone. Ethan had repainted the walls in soft yellows and greens, colours we'd chosen together for the nursery. I got rid of the dining set, he said quietly. Bought a new one. Didn't want you to have to look at that table every day. The new table was round, warm oak, no longer the formal mahogany Vivian had chosen. No head of the table, no control. Instead, Ethan and I started building new routines. Texting before he came home, cooking together, making every decision about the baby together. No outside input, but the test came sooner than we expected. At 7 months pregnant, Vivian sent a baby gift to my school, an expensive silver rattle with a note. Family heirlooms can't be kept away by restraining orders. Ethan took it straight to our lawyer. She's testing boundaries, he said, his voice hard. She's letting us know she's still watching. The rattle was returned, along with a warning. That night, Ethan held me as I cried, fear choking my words. What if she never stops? What if our daughter has to grow up always looking over her shoulder? We'll protect her, Ethan said, his voice steady with resolve. Every single day, every time. I won't fail her like I failed you. Dr. Martinez helped us create a safety plan. Passwords for daycare pickup, security cameras, a list of trusted contacts for emergencies. As my due date approached, another challenge came our way. The hospital birth plan. Vivian had somehow found out which hospital I'd registered at. We need to change hospitals, Ethan said, showing me a message from his mother. She's already trying to get information from the maternity ward. So we switched, registering under Chloe's address, ensuring the staff knew about the restraining order. It felt extreme, but seeing Ethan take these steps to protect us helped rebuild my trust in him. You're doing the work, Dr. Martinez said in one of our final sessions before the baby came. That's what matters. Looking around the house, our reformed home, the nursery we'd built together, the man Ethan was becoming, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Labour started at 2 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday. Ethan called Chloe first, then followed our plan. Hospital bag, car seat ready, security cameras checked. No signs of Vivian's Mercedes anywhere. The delivery room was calm. Nothing like the chaos I'd feared. Ethan stayed by my head, holding my hand, whispering encouragement. Chloe guarded the door, our self-appointed sentinel. After 12 hours of labour, our daughter, Lily Grace, entered the world, screaming her little lungs out. "She's perfect," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She looks just like you." As I held Lily for the first time, I studied her tiny features. Dark hair, Ethan's nose, 10 perfect fingers and toes. She was everything we'd fought for, everything we'd protected. But the first test came sooner than we thought. A flower delivery arrived at the hospital for Lily. Ethan intercepted it before it reached our room. The card read, "Blood is thicker than water. She'll need her grandmother soon enough." Instead of hiding it, Ethan showed me the card. "No more secrets," he said, his voice firm. He ripped it up in front of me. "We handle everything together now." The hospital security had doubled their rounds. Chloe's partner, Tom, an officer who knew the weight of the situation, volunteered to stay outside our door during the night shift. We were no longer just a family trying to rebuild, but a family actively fighting for survival, for peace. The kind of protection we needed wasn't just about cameras and locks. It was about knowing we weren't alone anymore, that we had a team watching our back, people who understood what we were up against. Coming home felt different than I ever imagined. It wasn't the typical first-day home excitement. This was an entry into a life that felt like it was just beginning, a life that needed every ounce of strength to keep moving forward. Ethan had done more than just prepare the house physically. He'd turned it into a fortress for us. New security cameras watched every corner of the property, locks that were stronger than steel, and motion lights that flickered on as soon as the air shifted. But inside, it was peaceful, calm. Just us, our little family of 3. I whispered softly as I walked into the nursery, holding Lily close to my chest. "Welcome home, baby." The room was nothing short of a sanctuary. Soft hues of green and yellow painted the walls, filled with books and stuffed animals that Ethan and I had carefully picked out together. There was no tension, no passive-aggressive notes, no eyes watching us. Just love. Pure love. The first few weeks blurred together. Midnight feedings, diaper changes, the constant hum of life that only a newborn could bring. Ethan, despite everything, had taken extended paternity leave. He was present, more than I ever thought he could be. We were crafting our parenting style, free from the toxic influence of Vivian. No one could manipulate or control us anymore. At Lily's 1-month checkup, the pediatrician smiled warmly as she weighed our daughter. "She's thriving," she said, a glowing praise that felt so foreign yet so comforting. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Those words felt like a quiet victory, but nothing was ever truly simple, not for us. As we sat in the nursery that night, Lily sleeping soundly in her crib, Ethan turned to me, his voice steady but laced with an underlying tension. "I saw my mom today," he said quietly. My heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "She tried to approach me," he continued, his voice tight, as if speaking the words was a battle. "At the grocery store. She asked about Lily." His jaw clenched. I called security, followed the plan, walked away, didn't engage. I exhaled slowly, my breath coming out in a soft whoosh as I released the tension that had built up in my chest. "And you're okay?" "Yeah," he nodded, but I could see the weight in his eyes. Said, but mostly pissed off. Our daughter will never know that kind of love, the kind that suffocates. She'll only know the kind that builds, the kind that's real. I looked down at Lily, peaceful in her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm. Ethan was right. The cycle was broken. The kind of love Lily would know wasn't filled with control, manipulation, or fear. It would be the kind that protected, that nurtured, that was free. The kind we had fought so hard to establish. I wrapped my arms around Ethan as he held me close. His voice, soft yet firm, broke the silence. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me a second chance, for showing me what a real family looks like. For her." I closed my eyes and leaned against him, letting the warmth of our small, safe world envelop me. "We did it together," I whispered back. "And we'll keep doing it every single day. For her." Outside, the sun was setting on another day in our new life. A life we had fought for. A life we would continue to protect with every ounce of our being. But even with all the changes, even with all the precautions, I knew there would be more tests ahead. The question lingered. Could we truly trust that the wounds could heal, that the past wouldn't come back to haunt us? Could Ethan truly change? Or was this just a wound that would never fully close? Share your thoughts.